I'm Audrey Thompson, 30 years old, and nothing could have prepared me for the moment my own brother slapped my daughter in the face. It was supposed to be a simple weekend. Just a family reunion at the lake house. Smiles, games, a break from the city. But what I got instead was a front row seat to the cruelty I thought I'd escaped years ago, and this time it came for my child. Let me back up. My daughter Lily is 6. Smart, loud, beautifully chaotic. She sings at all hours, wears glitter on Wednesdays for no reason. She feels everything and makes no apology for it. She's everything I wasn't allowed to be in that house. And yet, there I was back at the Thompson family lake house. The same place I spent my teenage years trying to disappear. I'd told myself it would be different. That maybe my parents had softened. That maybe my brother Derek, the golden boy, the crown jewel, would have grown a conscience. But people don't change just because you need them to. That morning started normal enough. Lily bounced down the hallway in her butterfly dress, talking about waffles and swimming. I plastered on my best mom smile, trying to push down the knot in my chest. The lake house stood like a monument to everything I hated about my upbringing. Weathered cedar, too much glass, too many walls that echo the wrong words. My mom, Eleanor, greeted us at the door like we were distant cousins she had to impress. My dad, Howard, barely looked up from his phone. And then there was Derek. Smug, polished, perfect. He walked in like he owned the place. Hell, he probably did. The room lit up for him the way it always had. My daughter smiled at him with that same innocent trust I once carried. I should have known better. By lunch, the undercurrent of tension was already dragging me under. My father praised Derek's latest corporate conquest, some 7-figure merger. My mother gushed about Natalie, Derek's wife, who always managed to be lovely while staying safely out of reach. And me, I was the still divorced administrative assistant with a spirited child, which is Thompson speak for you, failed twice. Still, I smiled through it for Lily. She spent the afternoon down by the dock with her cousins. I could see her from the porch, her little legs dancing around, singing some made-up song at the top of her lungs. And then I saw it. Derek stormed toward the kids. I couldn't hear what was said at first, but I saw the moment her body shrank. I saw the way her hands flew to her cheeks. I heard the crack, and then silence. He'd slapped her. My baby. I ran. Heart pounding, rage boiling. But before I could say a word, my father's voice cut through the air like an axe. She needed to learn some shame. My mother laughed. I froze. It wasn't just the slap, it was the smirk. The casual cruelty. The fact that they didn't even try to hide it. And that's when I remembered something. Paul. My uncle, by marriage. Sweet, awkward Paul with his camera gear and his weird obsession with family legacy documentaries. He'd been filming all weekend, and he had his audio gear running everywhere. They thought they were safe. They forgot about the microphone. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by Lily's bed watching her chest rise and fall. Her cheek had a faint red mark. Her eyes were puffy from crying. I'd comforted her the best I could, but there was a storm behind her eyes I couldn't touch. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every moment in my life when I had swallowed hurt because it came from family. I thought about how I'd excused their behavior for decades, told myself that's just how they are. But not for Lily, not anymore. By morning, something in me had shifted. Something hard, cold, focused. I walked into the kitchen where my parents were arguing about croissants. Eleanor was upset that the bakery didn't include her favorite ones. Howard was yelling into his Bluetooth about a dropped call. I didn't say good morning. I didn't ask about breakfast. I walked straight to Paul. Do you still have the audio from yesterday? He blinked. You mean everything? Yeah, it's all synced to the footage. Can I have a copy? He hesitated. Audrey, you know that was really messed up, right? His eyes softened. I'll get you a flash drive. By noon, I had everything, the footage, the audio, the timestamp. Paul even helped me clip the exact moment. It was crystal clear. Derek's voice, "Shut your mouth, Lily." The slap. Howard, she needed to learn some shame. Eleanor's laughter. I watched it twice. Then I emailed it to myself. Twice. I didn't confront them, not yet. I needed a plan. I needed power. Back home, I contacted Lily's therapist and scheduled an emergency session. I called my lawyer, yes, I had one from the divorce, and asked about child protection resources. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a reporter. Not TMZ, not some clickbait blogger. A local investigative journalist who specialized in family law loopholes and abuses of power. She'd once exposed a private school for covering up teacher misconduct. She was smart, measured, and relentless. I told her everything, and I sent the footage. She called me back within an hour. Audrey, this is big. Are you sure you want to go public? I looked over at Lily, who was humming while coloring in the living room. Her cheek was still slightly pink. Yes, I said, but not yet. Over the next few weeks, I played the game. Smiled during video calls with my mom. Sent thank you texts for the lovely weekend. I even mailed Howard a birthday card signed Love Audrey and Lily. And meanwhile, the journalist dug deeper. She found 2 former employees from Derek's firm who claimed he'd bullied female interns. She unearthed an old college disciplinary record buried under sealed files. She traced Howard's law firm's history of defending child custody abusers in exchange for campaign donations. Piece by piece, the mask of the Thompson family began to crack. But the final blow that came from someone I never expected, Natalie. One evening, she messaged me on Facebook. Natalie, I saw what happened to Lily. I've been quiet for too long. Can we talk? That's where I'll leave you for now. Because what Natalie revealed turned everything on its head. What she knew, what she had proof of, made me realize this wasn't just about a slap. It was about a pattern of generational control silence and fear masked as prestige. And I had just become the one person willing to break it all open. When Natalie messaged me, I stared at her name on my screen for almost a full minute. I'd never seen her post anything remotely personal on social media, just curated vacation photos, Pinterest-worthy dinners, and the occasional quote about balance or gratitude. She was always nice, polished, vanilla. Exactly the kind of woman my brother would marry. But this message? This was a crack in the glass. We met 2 days later at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. It was raining hard, the kind of summer storm that shows up uninvited and overstays. I recognized her immediately sitting by the window in a tan trench coat, her makeup, minimal hair tied back. She looked tired. I don't mean in a slept 5 hours way. I mean bone-deep exhaustion, the kind you only carry when you've been keeping someone else's secrets for too long. I walked in ordered black coffee because my nerves couldn't handle sugar and sat down across from her without saying much. She opened with a whisper. I saw it happen. The slap? I nodded slowly. She looked down at her latte, hands shaking slightly. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I should have said something right then. I wanted to, but what I asked, not unkindly, just honestly. She swallowed hard. Because he's hit me too. That sentence didn't just land. It detonated. And I sat there feeling the heat rise in my chest the way your blood starts screaming before your brain catches up. Natalie took a deep breath. It started small. Arguments that turned cruel. Grabbing my wrist too hard when we were at parties. Then last winter, he slapped me after I questioned a purchase on our joint account. Jesus, Natalie. She shook her head, cutting me off. He apologized. Said it was stress. Said his dad used to lose it too. He even bought me a spa weekend afterward. And I justified it. Because that's what women like me were raised to do, keep the family looking perfect. I didn't know what to say. I'm not a fixer. I'm a fighter, but there's no one-size-fits-all fix for trauma. What I knew, though, was that something had changed in her. She was done pretending. I want to help you, she said. I want Lily safe, and I want to be safe too. So we made a plan. It wasn't dramatic or full of espionage, no hidden cameras or wiretaps. It was quiet, methodical, and real. Natalie agreed to speak with the same journalist I'd already contacted under a pseudonym at first. She began keeping records, notes, screenshots, voicemails, receipts, proof. I coached her on what I knew from my own custody battles: keep copies off-site. Don't confront him until you have support. Never let him sense a shift. In the meantime, I filed an official complaint with Child Protective Services, attaching the clip from the lake house. I expected them to respond quickly, but I'd forgotten how slow the wheels of bureaucracy grind, especially when the abuser is a man in a suit with clean nails and a law degree dad. Weeks passed. Natalie and I checked in often, usually in private Instagram messages or voice memos disguised as recipe swaps. Every time she said, "Be safe," it wasn't empty, it was a mutual prayer. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Paul. He sounded shaken. "Audrey, I think someone knows I gave you the footage." "What happened?" "My laptop's been accessed, files missing, camera bag trashed, and yesterday Derek showed up at my house. I went cold." "Did he threaten you?" Paul paused. Not directly, but he asked if I'd been up to anything unethical. And then he smiled like we were boys playing poker. That night, I didn't sleep. Lily had a nightmare around midnight and crawled into bed with me. As I stroked her hair, I stared at the ceiling again. Only this time, the fear wasn't for me. It was for the people around me. Natalie, Paul, even the journalist. I had to accelerate everything. The next morning, I took the full set of files to the journalist's office myself, flash drive, printed transcripts, the whole thing. Her name was Sierra, and when I walked in, she was eating yogurt at her desk hair in a messy bun, surrounded by 3 whiteboards full of Post-it notes and red scribbles. "You brought it all?" she asked. "Yes, but I want to be part of telling the story. I'm not hiding, not anymore." She blinked, impressed. "Okay, then we tell it right. On the record, start to finish." Over the next few days, Sierra conducted long interviews with me and Natalie separately. She cross-checked timelines, followed money trails, pulled property records, and started contacting former classmates, colleagues, even a retired nanny from our childhood who remembered Eleanor disciplining Derek by locking him in closets. This story wasn't just about a slap anymore. It was about a culture. But it wasn't just the culture of our family. It was a broader one. One that praises powerful men for being strong leaders while dismissing women as emotional. One that turns a blind eye when abuse wears a suit. One that tells mothers to stay silent for the kids and tells daughters to stop overreacting. We were done with that. Meanwhile, back in reality, Derek sensed something. I could feel it in his texts. He started messaging me fake friendly things like, "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while, just wanted to check in," or "Hope Lily's doing great. We miss you guys." I didn't respond. Then came the email. Subject: reconciliation. He wrote like a therapist, all acknowledging past missteps and building healthier boundaries, but it was all smoke. The kind of PR apology you give when you feel heat coming. And the heat was coming. Sierra reached out to me one evening with a breathless update. "Audrey, we're going public. Monday. Feature story on the front page and a companion piece on the digital site with the footage embedded." My mouth went dry. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Legal cleared it. We've redacted Natalie's name for now, but the rest is verified and solid. Audrey, this is going to make waves." It did. The story dropped on a Monday morning. Headline: "The Perfect Son, Inside a Family's Culture of Silence and the One Woman Who Spoke Out." Within hours, my phone exploded. Texts, missed calls, emails, some supportive, some threatening. My mom left a voicemail in tears saying I'd ruined everything we've worked for. Howard emailed me a single line, "You will regret this." Derek silent, which was the most dangerous kind of response. That same day, I picked Lily up from school early and drove her to a cabin I'd booked under a fake name. It wasn't paranoia. It was protection. I left no digital footprint. Jenna, my best friend since college, had arranged it all. She even stocked the fridge. "You sure about this?" she asked, handing me the keys. "I'm not running. I'm holding space until the fire dies down." "Damn," she whispered. "You're really doing this." "Yeah," I said, watching Lily chase butterflies out by the porch. "For the first time in my life, I am." That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat on the porch alone with a blanket and a thermos of wine. I pulled the flash drive out of my pocket, the one that held everything: the slap, the commentary, the file Sierra had titled Audrey Truth. It was tiny, almost weightless, but it held my entire reclamation. I turned it over in my hands, thinking about the necklace my mom gave me on my 16th birthday. A dainty little gold chain with a charm that read Grace. She said I needed to remember it whenever I wanted to talk back. I never wore it again, but now I was reclaiming something else: my voice. The next morning, Natalie called. Her voice was shaking, but not from fear. Derek confronted me. "Are you okay?" "I am now." I told him I'd filed for divorce. I told him everything I gave Sierra. And Audrey? He didn't deny any of it. Silence stretched for a moment, heavy with something unspoken. Then she said, "Thank you for showing me I could do this." I hung up and wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of survival, of finally realizing that the chains you thought were yours to carry were never yours at all. But I wasn't done yet, because the world doesn't change just because your story is out there. You have to choose again and again to stand in your truth, and sometimes that means walking straight into the fire. The story going public changed everything and nothing. Yes, the article made noise. My inbox flooded. Some people thanked me. Others told me I'd destroyed my family over one slap. A few called me brave. Most called me dramatic. The comments section alone could be its own horror movie. But when you grow up in a family like mine, you learn early public perception is currency. And the Thompsons, we were rich in image. So it didn't surprise me when 2 weeks after the article dropped, I got an email from my mother. The subject line simply read, "Dinner." Not a single question mark. The body of the email was just one line. "We'd like to discuss this face-to-face." Saturday, 6 p.m., the lake house. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the old familiar ache creep up my spine. The one that whispered, "Just go. Keep the peace. Be reasonable." But another voice had grown louder since that slap, since Natalie's confession, since Paul's warning, since Sierra's story. A voice that didn't beg for room. A voice that demanded it. I texted Jenna. "Me, they want a meeting. Jenna, you going me? I don't know. Jenna, you don't have to. Me, I think I do. But I wouldn't go alone." I called Sierra. Told her everything. She reminded me she was still following up with CPS, that Natalie's divorce paperwork was moving, that several women had reached out with stories about Derek's aggression in corporate settings. The dam had cracked. But it hadn't broken yet. "I can't stop you," she said, "but document everything." So I did. Saturday came. I wore jeans, boots, and the old gray hoodie my dad used to hate. "You look like a college dropout," he once said. It became my favorite after that. I didn't bring Lily. She was with Jenna, safe, giggling over cartoons and making pillow forts. I drove up to the lake house, a lone flash drive and my purse recorder on my phone quietly rolling in my jacket pocket. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned the people who smile in daylight often sharpen knives at dusk. The driveway was full when I arrived. Paul's car, Derek's Tesla, Howard's Lexus. Even Eleanor's ridiculous little convertible was parked under the tree like it hadn't moved since 2008. The house looked the same, overgrown hydrangeas, peeling shutters, that American flag my dad never took down. It felt like walking into a grave I wasn't ready to dig up. I stepped through the front door, and everything slowed. There they were, my parents, sitting at the dining table like royalty. Derek stood by the fireplace, drink in hand. Natalie was not present. My mother stood first. "Audrey," she said, voice syrupy and tight. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, said nothing. Howard motioned to a chair. "Please, sit." I sat, arms crossed. "We wanted to clear the air," Eleanor began. "All of this media circus, it's been very upsetting." To who, I asked. "You or the donors to Dad's re-election committee." Howard stiffened. "This isn't about politics." I laughed. "It's only ever about politics with you." "Don't be dramatic," Derek interjected. "You've made your point. We get it. You're angry. But dragging the family name through the mud? Come on, there's a better way to handle things." That was the moment I saw it. The tell. His jaw clenched a little too tight. His fingers flexed around the glass. That was the look of a man not used to consequences. "You mean like hitting a 6-year-old in the face?" I asked. "Jesus, Audrey," he barked. "It was one goddamn mistake. She was screaming like a banshee, and I didn't. Didn't what I snapped. Mean it. Or think anyone would finally call you out." Eleanor stood again, hand raised. "Enough. This isn't productive." "Then why am I here?" I asked. Howard cleared his throat and reached into a manila folder. "Because we have a proposal." And there it was. The deal. Howard slid a typed document across the table. I didn't touch it. I let him talk. "It's a confidentiality agreement," he said, smoothing his tie. If you agree to retract the story or at least decline any further interviews, we're prepared to offer a financial settlement. For Lily, of course, a trust fund, educational expenses, discreet support, and closure. I stared at the folder like it was a snake. Closure, I repeated. Eleanor nodded, her smile brittle. We think it's time to heal Audrey. Let's stop all this public embarrassment. I picked up the document, read the first line. $250,000 in exchange for silence. They were trying to buy my pain, buy my daughter's face, buy the silence that kept them comfortable. I stood up. This is what you think of me, I said, voice low. That I'd trade my daughter's dignity for a padded check. No, Eleanor said quickly. We think you're overwhelmed. You're a single mom. We know it's hard. Don't you dare use my daughter as a bargaining chip, I snapped. Howard stood too now, trying to regain control. Audrey, think of the long game. You're a smart girl. What does all this really get you? Fame, a few news clips, maybe a podcast appearance, then what? Meanwhile, our name, your name is ruined. I leaned forward, locked eyes with him. You think I care about the Thompson name, I whispered. You already ruined that. I'm just shining a light on the wreckage. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with something none of them had felt in years: accountability. Derek scoffed. You've always needed an audience. I turned toward him slowly. And you've always needed someone to clean up after your messes. Mom, Dad, Natalie, me. He froze. I know, I added. I know everything. His face twitched. That was all I needed. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. Eleanor followed. Wait, Audrey, please. This can be fixed. Families fight, they repair, they survive. I paused, put my hand on the doorknob. Families don't hit children. Families don't cover it up. Families don't make hush money offers and call it love. She was crying now. Real tears or rehearsed, I couldn't tell anymore. Then what do you want? She whispered. I want you to sit with your shame, I said. The way I sat with mine for 30 years. And then I walked out. Outside, the air was cold. The sun had set behind the trees, leaving the driveway bathed in twilight. I sat in my car, hands shaking, and let out a laugh that turned into a sob halfway through. Not because I was sad, but because it was finally real. I'd faced the monster. And I wasn't burned. I was free. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. It was Sierra. Hey, I answered, voice hoarse. I just got a call, she said. From a former employee at Derek's firm. She's ready to talk. Full name. Statement on the record. She says he blackmailed her with a fake NDA. I exhaled. It's happening, Sierra said. This isn't just a family story anymore, Audrey. It's systemic. We're about to hit something bigger. I pulled into Jenna's driveway and saw Lily through the window dancing with a blanket over her head. Good, I whispered. Let's burn it down. After the lake house showdown, I thought the worst part was over. I'd told them off, walked away, held my ground, burned the bridge with a blowtorch, and didn't look back. But here's the thing. They never tell you about standing up to your past. It doesn't collapse when you leave. It follows you, sits in your passenger seat, hums in your kitchen, waits until you're brushing your daughter's hair and asks, "Are you sure you're not one of them?" I was folding laundry when Lily said it. She held up one of her butterfly dresses and asked in her soft little voice, "Mommy, if I'm bad again, will Uncle Derek come back?" It felt like someone punched me right in the lungs. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. She wasn't scared. She was curious. Like she'd connected cause and effect noise equals slap. Slap equals uncle disappears. If she stayed quiet, maybe he wouldn't return. Maybe she'd be safe. I knelt down, held her face gently. Sweetheart, listen to me. You weren't bad. You were never bad. What he did was wrong. It's never your fault when someone hurts you. Never. She looked at me for a long second, then asked, "But why didn't Grandma say that?" And there it was. Shame repackaged for the next generation. That night I couldn't sleep. Again. So I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years, one I kept buried under old tax returns and winter coats. Inside was everything I'd been too afraid to throw away: my old journals, letters I'd written, and never sent photos of me with smiles so forced they looked like bruises in black and white. There was one picture I kept flipping back to. I was 9, sitting on the front porch of the lake house holding a popsicle in one hand and shielding my eyes with the other. Derek stood behind me, smug as ever, holding up a frog like he'd discovered gold. My knees were scraped. You could see it barely, but I remembered that day. He'd pushed me down the hill behind the dock because I wouldn't shut up during his clubhouse speech. I scraped both knees on the rocks, bled through my socks. When I ran crying to my mom, she said, "Don't be such a girl about it. Your brother's learning to lead." That line stayed with me my whole life. Your brother's learning to lead. What was I learning? How to swallow blood. Sierra called me 2 days later. She sounded more fired up than usual. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "That ex-employee I mentioned, her name's Raina. She just handed over an email chain. Derek threatened her with a lawsuit if she ever spoke about a physical altercation at an office retreat." Physical how? Pushed her into a table. In front of people. She filed an internal report, and guess what? It vanished. Let me guess Howard's firm handled the internal investigation. Bingo. I felt my stomach twist, so it wasn't just family. He's been doing this everywhere. Yep. And now I have a second woman willing to talk too. The story's growing teeth. It should have felt victorious, but instead it felt nauseating. Every new piece of proof validated me and still managed to make me feel worse. Because the pattern was deeper than I thought. Wider, colder. And it had always been there. That weekend, Natalie reached out again. She wanted to meet, said it was important. We met at a community center near her new apartment. She was helping with a domestic violence support group, not as a leader, just as a quiet volunteer. She handed me a small box. Inside was a necklace. Gold chain. One word engraved on a simple disc. Grace. I froze. "This was yours, wasn't it?" she asked gently. I nodded. My mom gave it to me at 16. Said I needed to wear it whenever I felt mouthy. Natalie exhaled. She told me the same thing, almost word for word. I stared at the necklace. It felt like holding generational rot in the palm of my hand. "I found it in the bathroom drawer," she said. "After you left the lake house." I figured, maybe it was time you decided what to do with it. I closed the box. "I'm gonna melt it down." She smiled. We sat in silence for a while, watching 2 little girls race around the courtyard. Then she said, "There's something else." I turned to her. My prenup, it had a clause about domestic violence. If I could prove he hurt me, I wouldn't owe him spousal maintenance. But if I couldn't, he could come after me for defamation. My jaw clenched. So he set up the perfect trap. Exactly. But now that Sierra's piece is out, and with Raina and the other woman speaking up, it might be enough. I nodded. "I'll testify if you need me." "I might need you sooner than that," she said. "Because he knows I'm leaving. And I think he's watching me." I went cold. "What do you mean, watching?" "Last night I came home and the doormat was flipped." I never flip it. The hallway camera glitched for exactly 4 minutes. "You need to stay somewhere else." "I'm working on it." "No," I said firmly. "You and I both know what he's capable of. Tonight you come to Jenna's. Tomorrow we figure it out." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. My house isn't the one that should be full of shame. His is. That night, Natalie stayed in the guest room at Jenna's. We didn't talk much. Just made tea, played a card game with Lily, and listened to the quiet. Sometimes quiet is more healing than words. But around midnight, my phone buzzed again. It was Paul. His message was just one sentence. "I found something. You need to come to Grandma Sylvia's house, alone." Now you have to understand, Grandma Sylvia was my dad's mother. Sharp as a tack even at 86. She lived in a tiny cottage about 30 minutes from town. We weren't close. She was always kind to me in the way distant relatives are, polite, sweet, vaguely detached, but she hated confrontation. So for Paul to be there and for her to let him. Something was up. I left Natalie and Lily with Jenna, threw on a hoodie, and drove into the night. The road curved through the hills like a question I didn't want to answer. The kind of drive you only take when the past calls you by name. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, Paul was already waiting on the porch. He held up a box. Weathered metal, locked with a cheap padlock. "She asked me to give it to you," he said. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just motioned inside. Grandma Sylvia sat at the kitchen table sipping tea like nothing was unusual. Her eyes met mine and something in her face cracked. Not sadness, not guilt, just an old truth getting tired of hiding. "I always knew it wasn't right," she said softly. "The way they protected him. Protected who? I asked, though I already knew. Your father, then Derek. And now you're the only one who didn't turn away. Paul slid the box toward me. Open it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Dated as far back as the 70s. Letters from teachers, coaches, even neighbors. All warning signs, all ignored. Eleanor's handwriting popped up over and over again, handled internally. Don't escalate. One letter was from a school counselor describing Howard as unreasonably aggressive toward Audrey during parent meetings. I had no memory of it, but my body did. My hands shook as I read. Another letter dated 3 months before I turned 16 was from a doctor. Signs of bruising inconsistent with reported injuries. My name was on the chart. My breath caught. Why did you keep this? I asked Sylvia, voice barely audible. Because I thought maybe, someday, someone would want the truth. I stared at the pile of paper. It was heavy, too heavy for one box. I do, I said finally. I want it. And I took it. On the drive back, the box sat on the passenger seat like a ghost. I glanced at it every few seconds, half expecting it to vanish. But it didn't. When I got home, I placed it on the table next to the Grace necklace. The two things, side by side, felt like a before and after of my whole life. One was meant to silence me. The other proof I'd never been crazy. But I wasn't done yet. Because truth isn't justice. It's just the first step. And now I had a decision to make. There's this thing that happens when you stop being afraid of the people who raised you. It's like an internal click, almost physical. Not loud, but final. You stop explaining yourself. Stop managing their emotions. You stop waiting for someone else to call it what it is, abuse control rot under gold paint. You call it yourself, out loud, in public, and you don't ask permission. The box Grandma Sylvia gave me sat on my dining table for 2 days before I made the call. It wasn't hesitation, exactly. It was reverence. I knew what was inside wasn't just evidence, it was proof that the sickness didn't start with Derek. It started long before me. Before Lily, before Natalie, before any of us had the words to fight back. I took photos of every letter, scanned every page. Some were stained, some barely legible, some in the kind of polite language people used in the 1980s to describe horrifying things. But the pattern was undeniable. Howard had been protected his whole career. Eleanor had used her charm and connections to make problems disappear. Derek had simply learned the playbook. Sierra's voice caught when I told her. This is the iceberg, she said. Everything else has just been tip until now. We met at her office the next day. She sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting documents, muttering to herself like a detective in a crime drama, her glasses fogged with sweat. I handed her the drive with the scanned documents, then dropped the physical box at her feet. She looked at it like it was holy. You ready for what this will stir up? She asked. No, I admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the difference between pain and purpose. Pain waits for safety. Purpose kicks the damn door in. By the time Sierra's follow-up story dropped, the first ripples had already reached Derek's corporate board. Someone leaked the footage again, this time framed with the letters, the witness statements, the trail of hush money documents Sierra had uncovered. It all came together like a symphony of rot. And the public, they listened. The headline read, "The Thompson Legacy, A Family's Silence, A Daughter's Reckoning." It went viral within hours. Natalie was safe thanks to a restraining order Sierra helped fast-track through a pro bono lawyer. Lily stayed with Jenna while I did interviews, first local radio, then a podcast, then a morning show with a host who held my hand the entire segment. I told the story, not just the slap, not just the letters, the whole damn thing. And I told it like it was mine because it was. And still the blowback came. Not from strangers, from cousins, from former neighbors, from people who had my number saved for years and never once called until I became that girl on the internet airing dirty laundry. Some accused me of revenge, others of exaggeration. One even sent me a quote from the Bible, something about forgiveness. I didn't respond. I'd forgiven plenty. What I hadn't done was let the wound fester in silence so everyone else could stay comfortable. Let them sit in their discomfort for once. I had sat in mine for decades. The twist came from the last person I expected. Natalie texted me around 2 a.m. with a photo. a screen grab from a text conversation she'd had years ago with Howard. Howard, if Derek ever does what I warned you about, call me first. We'll fix it before it becomes a real problem. Underneath her message, I didn't know what it meant until now. My stomach dropped. He'd known, not suspected knew, and rather than address it, he prepped a cleanup plan. That morning, Sierra updated the story again. The update was short but brutal. New evidence suggests knowledge of Derek's abusive behavior went as far back as his father. Sources claim warnings were met with offers to fix rather than intervene. Within 48 hours, Howard's law firm announced his early retirement. He blamed the toxic media climate. Derek's corporate board suspended him pending internal review. Eleanor? She disappeared from public view entirely. No statements, no denials, just silence. But the real explosion came from Lily. She was playing with blocks one afternoon when she looked up and said, "Are we the only ones telling the truth?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "All the grown-ups are mad. Except you and Miss Natalie. Everybody else is quiet or angry or saying stuff that isn't real." I sat down next to her, heart heavy. Sometimes when the truth makes people look bad, they pretend it doesn't exist. She paused, then said, "That's stupid." And that was it. That simple. That clean. Out of the mouths of babes. Later that week, I returned to the lake house, alone. Not for closure, for control. I walked through the property like it was a crime scene, which in many ways it was. I sat in my childhood bedroom, now a guest room with throw pillows and a vaguely nautical theme. I opened the closet and found one of my old journals still tucked behind a beam. I flipped to the first page. I am loud on paper because they don't hear me when I talk. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. Outside, I walked down to the dock. The same one where Lily had been slapped. The same one where Derek pushed me when I was 9. I pulled the Grace necklace from my pocket and held it up to the sun. It looked so small, so stupid. One word pressed in gold meant to keep me pliable. I threw it in the lake, and it sank like a lie finally told. That evening, Paul met me at a diner on the edge of town. He ordered fries and a milkshake like he always did, like we were still teenagers escaping family dinners. "I'm proud of you," he said between bites. "I'm not proud, I'm just tired." Yeah, that's what truth feels like sometimes. Not glory, just heavy peace. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a cassette tape. "This is from '94, he said. "I used to record everything, remember? This one's from Christmas. I didn't even realize what I caught until I listened last week." I raised an eyebrow. "Your dad yelling at Eleanor about keeping Audrey in line. Something about how if she turns out soft, it's on you." He slid it across the table. "You sure you want me to have this?" "I'm sure I don't want it anymore." I took it. Another piece of the puzzle. Another brick in the story. Another page in the house that shame built. I went home and started writing, not for Sierra, not for the media, just for myself. I wrote everything I remembered, everything I'd buried. I wrote about the night I hid in the laundry room to avoid Howard's lecture, about Eleanor's rules for what girls should never say in front of guests, about how Derek once called me a liability when I cried after Mom slapped me for being too loud in front of the senator's wife. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I kept writing. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even therapy. It was reclamation. And when I was done, I wrote one last sentence. "The fire doesn't ask permission to burn. Neither do I." The next morning, I got an email from Sierra. Just 3 words. "It's happening." Monday. The final piece of the series. The one with the letters, the tape, the internal cover-up, and my name on every line. I called Natalie. She was crying happy tears. I hugged Lily so hard she squeaked. I looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. Because for once in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was choosing. The story broke on a Monday. It wasn't just a headline anymore, it was everywhere. National outlets picked it up. News anchors said my name like it mattered. Audrey Thompson, whistleblower. Audrey Thompson, former victim, now advocate. Audrey Thompson, the woman who broke the cycle. I didn't feel brave. I felt stripped bare. Like the house I'd been renovating inside myself had all its windows ripped open, and people were walking by pointing at the walls debating whether the colors clashed. Natalie called just before noon. She'd been watching the coverage, breathless, stunned. "I think we actually did it," she said. "It's not just you anymore. It's not just me. They're all finally seeing it." I wanted to believe her, but I knew better. Because truth, especially ugly truth, doesn't land in soft places. It cracks, it splinters, and it always asks for more. That week, CPS finally opened a formal investigation not just into the slap, but into the household I'd grown up in. Old files resurfaced. A former pediatric nurse came forward anonymously claiming Eleanor once threatened her for suggesting therapy for Derek after he bloodied a classmate's nose in 4th grade. Another teacher remembered how Howard bullied the school board into revoking a suspension when Derek got caught cheating. It was all becoming a pattern now documented, confirmed, stitched together by people who no longer had anything to lose. And Derek? He finally made a statement. It came through his lawyer. Cold, scripted, full of empty regret and careful phrasing. Mistakes were made. Events mischaracterized. Family matters should remain private. No apology to Lily. No direct admission. Just legal word salad. His board announced a permanent separation. The firm issued a new code of conduct. Howard's name was quietly removed from public law directories. Eleanor's social accounts vanished completely. And Paul. He became the unexpected hero called for interviews, asked to speak on generational trauma. I watched it all unfold from the same kitchen table where Lily ate waffles and painted unicorns with glitter glue. One morning, she looked up from her cereal and asked, "Are the bad people gone now?" I knelt down beside her. Some are just quieter. But you're safe. That's what matters. She blinked. But you're still fighting, right? I nodded. She gave me a look I'll never forget. It wasn't gratitude. It was recognition. She saw me. Not just as mommy, but as a woman who chose to stay standing when it would have been easier to lie down. In the weeks that followed, the noise softened. No more press calls, no more lawyers, just me and the silence that comes after a long storm. I started therapy again. Real therapy, not crisis intervention, but the long-haul kind. The kind where you talk about how you parent yourself while parenting your child, about how shame gets in your bones, about how forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but sometimes it means setting down the weight and walking away. Natalie filed for divorce officially. The restraining order held. She started volunteering at a local center helping women navigate custody filings. She looked brighter every time I saw her, like someone who finally figured out how to breathe with both lungs. And Paul? He bought a camper van. Said he was driving up the coast for a while. Going where no Thompsons can find me, he joked. I think he needed his own version of healing, one that didn't involve headlines. Jenna stayed close. She never once said I told you so. She just stocked my fridge, picked up Lily from school when I couldn't, and texted things like I'd testify again if you ever needed me, with snacks. But the biggest shift came from inside my own house. I started seeing Lily differently. Not as someone I needed to protect every second, but as someone learning to trust her own instincts. One night she got mad at me over bedtime and shouted, "You don't understand me." And instead of snapping or retreating, I sat down and said, "You're right. Help me understand." It sounds small, but it felt revolutionary. I never got that kind of listening growing up. I wanted her to know I could take her anger and not punish her for it. A month after the story aired, I got an invitation from Grandma Sylvia. Handwritten, no email, no text, just a note in the mailbox with my name in big block letters. It read, "Audrey, if you have the time, I'd like to sit with you. No expectations, just truth. Love, Sylvia." I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't angry at her, not really, but I wasn't sure what I'd say. What more could be said, really? She'd kept the box. She'd watched everything happen, but she'd also let it sit for decades before speaking. Still, I went. Her house was quiet, smaller than I remembered. She met me at the door with tea already steeping. We sat at the kitchen table like nothing had ever exploded. She spoke first. "I always knew you were the one who'd break it." Break what I asked. The silence, the chain, the polite pretending, the kind of family legacy people frame on a wall but never question. I didn't say anything. "I kept that box not because I thought I'd use it," she said, "but because I hoped someone else would." "You did, and I'm proud of you." I nodded. "I wish you'd used it sooner." She nodded too. So do I. And that was enough. On the way home, I stopped by the lake. Not the lake house that was still up for sale. No takers yet. The listing photos looked like a Pottery Barn fever dream, all white couches and vague coastal charm. But I knew what was underneath a house that had eaten too many secrets and started to rot from the inside. I stood by the water holding a flat rock in my hand. Lily had painted it a week earlier, covered it in pink hearts and stars. She said it was for when we go to a quiet place. I threw it into the lake. It made a soft splash. Sometimes closure isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the absence of needing more. Weeks turned into months. The media faded. So did the hate mail. Lily got taller. I started journaling again, not out of survival, but curiosity. I applied to a part-time writing course just for me. I even went on a date, not because I was healed or looking for forever, but because I realized I no longer felt ashamed of the mess I'd survived. I told him up front too. My family imploded, I exposed it, and now I'm figuring out who I am outside of their shadow. Still want to split nachos? He did. We laughed about it later. He said that might have been the most honest first date line I've ever heard. Maybe that's the new legacy. Not silence. Not shame. Just truth, messy and unfiltered, spoken plainly without apology. The last big moment came quietly. Lily was drawing on the back porch, humming to herself. I was inside folding towels when she called out, "Mommy, come see." I walked out and looked over her shoulder. She'd drawn us, me and her, holding hands. But in the sky above us were two huge words written in shaky 6-year-old letters. "We are loud." I teared up. Not because she remembered what I told her months ago, but because she believed it now. Loud wasn't something to fear. It was something to grow into. There's no perfect ending here. My parents haven't called. Derek is still trying to rehab his image through charity events. Eleanor might be hiding in some coastal condo. I don't know. I don't care. But I know who I am now. And more importantly, I know who I'm not. I'm not their scapegoat. I'm not their fixer. I'm not their secret keeper. I'm Lily's mother. I'm the woman who said no when silence was expected. I'm the fire they couldn't contain. And I'm not asking permission anymore. Story 2. I'm Nathan Carter, 34, and if you had told me last year that I'd walk away from my entire family without looking back, I would have laughed it off. But betrayal doesn't always arrive with loud fights or dramatic ultimatums. It creeps up quietly hidden under the weight of unspoken expectations until one day it crushes you. For years, I was the steady one, the dependable eldest, the quiet fixer who always stepped in when things fell apart. I had a decent career as a software consultant, not flashy, but comfortable. My car, a 6-year-old Subaru. My apartment, clean, modest. My weekends usually consumed handling someone else's problems. My mother, Vivian, 63, worked part-time at a craft store and loved telling everyone she was semi-retired. My father, Ron, 65, still fancied himself a handyman, though every home project somehow ended up costing triple and needing a bailout. My younger brother, Ryan, 30, was in that perpetual finding himself phase one year, a photographer the next, an amateur brewer. And then there was my sister Jenna, 27, a free spirit in the worst possible sense, always posting yoga poses and mindfulness quotes, while her Venmo balance languished near zero. It didn't happen all at once, this slide into becoming their financial safety net. A couple $100s for Ryan's rent when a client ghosted him. A few hundred more when Jenna's vintage VW broke down for the umpteenth time. My parents' property taxes. When did they stop budgeting for those? I rarely protested. It felt easier to help than to deal with the guilt-laced lectures. "We're family, Nathan," my mother would sigh. "Families support each other." And I did. Quietly, predictably. The one thing I kept sacred, the annual Vermont cabin trip, was different. A slice of wilderness that belonged to my late grandfather where we could unplug and reconnect. When he passed, he left it jointly to my dad and my uncle Caleb, a gruff but dependable figure who always treated me like an adult. Every October, like clockwork, I coordinated this trip. I managed the permits, the repairs, the supplies. I even fronted the annual maintenance fee, $1,500 this year alone. My family didn't lift a finger. they simply showed up. So when Jenna called a last-minute family Zoom in early September, I assumed it was to finalize this year's trip. I was already pulling up my spreadsheet, proud that I'd prepaid the cabin caretaker. But the moment I logged on, I knew something was off. The screen filled with too cheerful faces. Mom sipping wine, Dad chuckling at some inside joke, Ryan lounging like he didn't have a care in the world. And then there was Jenna practically glowing as she waved at someone off-screen. That someone was Kyle, Jenna's new boyfriend. The man boy who made a living as a travel influencer, but mostly seemed to drift between couch surfing and Instagram stories about coffee beans. I'd met him once. He called my hiking boots cute vintage cosplay and asked if there was Uber in the forest. "Nathan," Jenna chirped, interrupting my opening sentence. "Guess what? Kyle is coming with us this year. He's so excited to connect with nature." That phrasing, "coming with us," made me pause. "Okay, cool," I said slowly, still trying to steer the call toward logistics. "So, about the trip dates," Ryan cut in. "Oh yeah, about that," he said, glancing sideways at Mom. "We kind of already left." Silence. "Left," I repeated. Mom cleared her throat, looking everywhere but the camera. "Sweetheart, it all came together really fast. Kyle had a gap in his schedule and it seemed easier this way. More spontaneous, less planning." That word planning hung there like an accusation. "I already paid the caretaker," I said flatly. "I blocked off the week at work. You take things so seriously, Nathan." Dad chuckled. "This was just a chance to let go. Relax." The betrayal didn't feel loud. It felt surgical. They'd gone to the cabin the one I paid for, organized, and kept up without even telling me. Worse, they brought Kyle. The guy who once asked me if hunting season meant there was a bar crawl in town. I didn't argue. I logged off, staring at the blank screen while a cold, clear realization took shape. They hadn't forgotten me, they'd excluded me. And they didn't even feel guilty. For the next few days, my texts to Ryan went unanswered. Jenna sent a breezy, "Hope you're well," with a selfie from the cabin deck. Mom posted pictures of Kyle chopping wood badly with hashtags like #HadManaNature. That's when it clicked. I had always assumed they leaned on me out of need. But this wasn't need. This was entitlement, expectation. And the final insult, they used my money to fund their spontaneous getaway while treating me like the uptight killjoy they were relieved to leave behind. I poured myself a whiskey that night and opened my laptop not to plead, but to prepare. A spreadsheet glowed back at me every payment, every utility bill, every auto transfer I'd quietly maintained for them. The total, almost $34,000 in 2 years. If they preferred Kyle's easygoing vibes to my intensity, they could have it. By dawn, I was ready to vanish, not in anger, but in quiet resolve. This was no longer about a trip to the cabin. This was about setting myself free. I didn't sleep that night. The glow of my laptop screen reflected in the whiskey glass as I scrolled through every auto payment, every quiet bailout I'd made for years. Each transaction was a symbol of the unspoken deal I'd had with my family. They could ignore me, belittle me, roll their eyes at my planning because they knew I'd still cover the bills. But what happens when you take the support for granted and then decide you don't even want the person behind it? By 3 a.m., I had a plan, a dangerous one, honestly. Cutting off people who rely on you isn't just a financial decision. It's emotional dynamite. I was about to light a match. The first thing I did was call my bank and kill the auto payments I'd set up for my parents' utilities. Gas, electric, water, all back in their names. Then I revoked the automatic tuition payments for Ryan's online creative entrepreneurship program, the one he never seemed to finish. And Jenna's car insurance gone. She could figure out how to keep her yoga instructor lifestyle intact on her own. The emergency credit card I'd given Dad for repairs was next. I froze it mid-billing cycle. No warning. Each click felt both terrifying and liberating, like I was cutting cords that had tethered me to a sinking ship. But it wasn't just about money. This was about symbols, about reclaiming that sacred Vermont cabin too. I remembered something my grandfather once said when we were sitting by the fireplace. This place isn't for people who just want a vacation. It's for people who respect what it takes to keep it alive. That line hit differently now. Before dawn, I called Uncle Caleb, the one family member who'd always respected me without pretense. They took Kyle up there, Caleb, without even telling me. On my deposit. A pause. They did what? Yeah, I said the words cold but calm. They're sitting in that cabin right now like it's theirs. Caleb let out a low whistle. You want me to come up there with you? No, I said quietly. I need to do this alone. That morning, I packed my old canvas duffel bag, filled the Subaru's tank, and began the 5-hour drive north. The autumn leaves were just starting to turn the kind of gold and crimson that always made me feel small and grounded at the same time. But today, I didn't feel connected to that beauty. I felt like an outsider driving toward a showdown I hadn't asked for, but couldn't avoid. As I drove, I thought about something else my grandfather used to say, a phrase I never understood until now. Respect isn't owed just because you share blood. Simple, but brutal. By the time I reached the gravel path that led to the cabin, I spotted the unmistakable signs that they were there. Ryan's dented Jeep parked sideways across the driveway like he couldn't even be bothered to park properly. Jenna's hatchback plastered with bumper stickers about mindfulness and adventure. And Kyle's car too, a leased SUV that still had the dealer plates on it. I parked quietly and stepped out into the cold mountain air. The sound of laughter carried from the porch. I could see them through the trees, Kyle holding a mug like he was king of the damn woods. Dad laughing at something Kyle said, Jenna sitting cross-legged on the steps as if this was all some Instagram shoot. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to take a slow breath. This was my family. These were the people who'd decided they didn't need me, that I was too intense, too careful, too predictable. And yet they were here using the cabin. I maintained the space. I protected the place that had always been about more than just rustic decor and crackling fires. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell. Instead, I unlocked the maintenance shed around back where the circuit breakers and water main valves were kept and methodically flipped everything off. Electricity gone. Water off. Then I walked quietly to the propane tank and shut that down too. Symbolic. Necessary. When the lights flickered out inside, I heard the confusion ripple immediately. The door swung open and there was Kyle barefoot and wearing some ridiculous wool sweater. Dude, what the hell, he called spotting me by the shed. I stayed calm. Power's off, I said simply. Did you turn it off? He asked, looking utterly baffled. Yes. Why would you do that? By now, the rest of them were crowding onto the porch, staring down at me like I was some lunatic. My father stepped forward. Nathan, what's going on? Why are you here? His voice had that tone disbelief followed by exasperation. Like I was the one ruining their plans. Like I was being difficult again. That's when it clicked for me, fully clicked, not just intellectually, but in my gut. I was never going to be appreciated for keeping things afloat. Not once. They didn't respect me because they'd never had to confront what life looked like without me. I stood there a long moment, then looked Dad in the eye. I own 25% of this cabin, I said evenly. His face froze. What? Grandpa amended the deed before he died. Caleb and I each have a quarter stake. You don't get to use this place without me agreeing to it. You could feel the mood shift on that porch. Even Kyle finally stopped posturing. Jenna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Pack up, I said quietly. You're leaving today. And here's the kicker. They didn't even fight me. Not really. Maybe they knew they had no ground to stand on. Maybe they were just embarrassed. But one by one, they began packing. No shouting, no bargaining, just quiet shame. The last thing I did before I locked the cabin behind them was stand alone on the porch for a moment, staring out at the tree line where I used to sit as a kid with Grandpa, listening to him talk about respecting nature and yourself. I felt none of the triumph I thought I would feel. No satisfaction. Just clarity. I wasn't done yet. This was just the first step, and as I locked the door and turned back toward my car, I could feel a bigger storm brewing, a confrontation that would cut deeper than shutting off utilities or reclaiming a cabin. I was finally ready to stop being their silent safety net, and I had no intention of ever going back to how things were. The drive back from the cabin was different. I wasn't angry anymore, not the white-hot rage I felt when I first realized they'd excluded me. That had burned out somewhere between shutting off the water and locking the cabin door. What I felt now was cleaner, colder, and almost surgical resolve. For the first time in years, I was operating purely for myself, not to win their approval or keep peace. The entire drive back to Boston was quiet, except for the occasional hum of tires on wet asphalt. I didn't even bother to turn on the radio. My mind was busy drafting a list, not a spreadsheet this time, but something deeper, a mental inventory of every way they had depended on me, every subtle thread they had wrapped around my life under the label of family. Those threads had felt like duty. Now they felt like chains. When I finally got home, I made one last round of phone calls to cancel my parents' cell phone family plan, which I'd been paying for since 2015, to remove myself as guarantor on Ryan's lease, to formally close the joint account I'd set up with Jenna when she couldn't get her own credit card. Each action felt symbolic, like clearing a table after an indulgent but exhausting dinner party. No shouting, no explanations, just finality. Let them figure it out. Let them actually experience what self-reliance feels like, something I had been practicing silently for years while they coasted on my reliability. 2 days later, the texts began. First, Jenna, short and syrupy. Hey, so weird thing happened, my phone service got cut off. Do you know anything about that, Miss You? I didn't answer. Then Ryan. Dude, the rental office says my co-signer bailed. Are you messing with me? Still silence. And then Mom predictably ratcheted it up a notch. Nathan, your father and I are very worried. We can't reach Jenna or Ryan either. Did something happen? Please call us. This feels petty and beneath you. Beneath me. The irony almost made me laugh out loud. They didn't even realize they were proving my entire point. Their calm, orderly lives had always depended on me quietly taking care of things so they didn't have to. That evening, I sat in my dim apartment, a glass of bourbon in hand, and thought about that cabin again, not just the building itself, but what it symbolized. When I was a kid, that cabin had been my sanctuary, a place where I felt useful, respected, needed. Grandpa never mocked me for double-checking supplies or planning firewood. He'd called it being prepared. But somewhere along the way, my family took that trait and twisted it into a flaw. I could feel it now. They didn't want a son or a brother who planned, who paid, who protected. They wanted someone they could outsource their responsibility to. And the minute I asked for basic respect, they called me rigid, controlling, cold. But here's the truth that had crystallized since that long drive home. Control wasn't my problem. It was their crutch. And I was done being their crutch. 3 days later, Uncle Caleb called. Unlike the rest of them, he didn't beat around the bush. They're freaking out, he said flatly. Your mom called me twice today crying. Jenna says you cut her off. Ryan's blaming you for the lease thing. And your dad, well, he's trying to hold it together, but apparently they got a foreclosure notice on the house. I stayed silent for a beat, then asked, and you, what do you think, Caleb? He sighed. I think you finally did what you should have done a long time ago. But, he trailed off, they're asking for a family meeting. The phrase hit me like a slap. A family meeting. Like we were going to sit around the living room with coffee and hash this all out like adults. Like they hadn't replaced me with Kyle on a trip I paid for. Like this was just a misunderstanding and not a deliberate exclusion that exposed years of unspoken resentment. But there was one part of me, a small part, that wanted to see them squirm. That wanted them to sit in a circle and realize that I wasn't going to show up with a checkbook and fix everything anymore. That wanted to hear them say out loud what they really thought about me. So I said yes. Tell them I'll come, I told Caleb. But I'm not promising anything. I'm not coming to apologize or make this easy. I'm coming so they can look me in the eye and say what they should have said a long time ago. That Sunday, I pulled into my parents' driveway exactly at 6 p.m. I didn't bother to knock. I stood outside for a moment, taking in the sagging gutters, the peeling paint, the dead flowers in the front garden. The house itself had become a symbol of everything wrong with this family, a facade that used to seem solid but was now showing the cracks I'd been patching for years. Inside, they were all assembled in the living room, awkward and jumpy. Jenna perched on the arm of the sofa, arms crossed defensively. Ryan stared at his phone like he could somehow text his way out of this. Mom sat rigidly on the edge of her chair, her face drawn tight with worry. Dad, surprisingly quiet, stood by the fireplace where so many family photos used to hang, but now sat empty. No Kyle in sight, I noted. Probably bailed the second the utilities got cut. I didn't sit down. "So," I said, my voice quiet but sharp, "this is the part where you explain yourselves." The silence that followed was rich, uncomfortable, heavy. Finally, Mom spoke. "Nathan, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just needed a break from all the rules. You always have rules. Rules like paying bills on time, keeping a roof over your heads, making sure no one's car gets repossessed." I asked. "Yeah, those are tough rules." Dad cleared his throat. "Look, son, this whole thing has gotten out of hand. You've made your point, but it's time to get back to normal. Let's not let this ruin the family." And there it was, the phrase I'd been waiting for, get back to normal. But normal wasn't coming back. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally done patching their leaks, done carrying their weight. The silence that followed was different now. I could feel the power shift, quiet but absolute. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there looking around that room at people who had taken me for granted for far too long. And then I simply said, "You keep saying you want things to go back to normal, but this is normal now. You're going to have to learn how to live without me fixing everything." Their faces fell. It was the first time they truly understood I wasn't bluffing. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. I left the family meeting that night with my shoulders square and my mind clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking out weighed down by guilt or the exhausting responsibility of fixing what no one else wanted to address. They had shown me exactly who they were, people more comfortable mocking me behind my back than facing the truth when it was in front of them. And for once, I chose not to carry their discomfort for them. As I drove home, the phrase kept echoing in my head, "This is normal now." It was both a declaration and a warning, and I meant every word of it. But the real test wasn't going to be walking out of that room. It was going to be holding the line when their inevitable fallout hit. And it hit fast. The very next morning, Uncle Caleb called again, not to mediate, but to give me a heads up. "They're panicking," he said bluntly. "Your dad's been on the phone with the bank all morning. Jenna's car insurance lapsed officially as of today, and Ryan got notice that he's being evicted next month. Your mom's calling cousins asking for a short-term loan, but, well, let's just say your family reputation has caught up with her." That last part stung more than I expected. It shouldn't have surprised me. Mom had spent years spinning a picture-perfect narrative to outsiders while leaning on me to quietly hold everything together, but hearing that her calls for help were falling flat still felt like a small shock. I wasn't immune to the weight of that collapse. I just refused to let it drag me back in. That evening, as if on cue, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered, and of course it was Jenna. Her voice was light, almost playful, as if pretending nothing had happened would reset the whole dynamic. "Nate, listen," she began, slipping back into the casual nickname she hadn't used in years. "I was thinking, maybe I overreacted a little. Maybe we all did. Let's get coffee, just you and me. We can talk this out." I closed my eyes and took a breath before answering. "Jenna," I said evenly, "you're not calling because you miss me. You're calling because you need something." There was a pause on the line just long enough to confirm the truth she couldn't admit. "Well, it doesn't have to be like that." "But it is," I said gently. "Look, I don't hate you. I don't hate any of you. I just finally understand that what we had wasn't family, it was dependency. I don't want to go back to that." Her response was a quiet fine followed by the click of disconnection. I stared at the phone for a long moment afterward, not sad exactly, but exhausted by the emotional labor it took to maintain relationships that were built entirely on what I could provide. That exhaustion gave way to something surprising: freedom. Real freedom, not the kind that comes from just saying no to a phone call or declining a family dinner, but the deeper, cleaner freedom of realizing that I was no longer a character in their story. I was writing my own now. Over the next few weeks, I rebuilt routines around this new version of myself. Small things. At first, I replaced my aging couch, started working out more consistently, spent long weekends reading and hiking, not for anyone else, not because it was a checklist item, but because it gave me peace. I didn't talk about my family to coworkers or friends anymore. When they asked, I just said, "We're not close," and left it at that. No explanations, no defenses, just facts. The cabin stayed empty for that first winter, a conscious choice. I visited twice alone, once to install solar panels and upgrade the locks, a symbolic severance from the era when Dad treated it like an open house, and once just to sit on the porch with a coffee and watch the snow fall. Those quiet mornings felt more real than any holiday gathering we'd ever shared. The place felt different now, still mine, still sacred, but reclaimed in a new way. It wasn't a backdrop for obligation anymore. It was a symbol of boundary and peace. And then one afternoon in early spring, something unexpected happened. Uncle Caleb called, not to plead on anyone's behalf, but with an offer. "I've been thinking," he said, "maybe it's time I sold my quarter share of the cabin. You're the only one who really cares about the place now. I'm not as young as I used to be, and frankly, I'd like to see it cared for properly before I'm too old to come up there at all." His words hit me harder than I expected. Caleb was the only one who'd ever treated me like an equal in the family, the only one who never mocked my spreadsheets or quiet way of being. But his offer was fair, and I understood the subtext he was letting go too. After a moment's pause, I said, "Yeah, let's talk numbers." That night, I poured myself a bourbon, sat at my kitchen table, and started a new spreadsheet. This one wasn't for anyone else. No auto payments, no hidden gifts, no secret sacrifices. Just a simple, deliberate plan for purchasing Caleb's share of the cabin and turning the place into something new. Maybe a retreat, maybe a rental for hikers and writers, maybe just a quiet place where no one's voice but my own, and maybe a few birds and wind through the trees would fill the air. I didn't feel the need for revenge anymore. The silence I'd given them was punishment enough, and frankly, it wasn't even about punishment at this point. It was about choosing peace over chaos, reality over pretense. And as I reviewed the numbers, a strange thought crossed my mind. Maybe someday, years from now, I'd invite Ryan or Jenna or even Mom and Dad up to the cabin, not out of obligation or guilt, but as equals, as people who'd finally learned to stand on their own. Maybe or maybe not. I didn't need an answer right now. The next morning, I drove up to the cabin again, not to check on repairs or stock firewood or balance anyone else's needs, but just to be there. I sat on that old wooden bench my grandfather built, a place that once symbolized tradition and now represented something more radical, freedom with boundaries. As the sun set behind the trees, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. This was the new normal. And for the first time in my life, that felt exactly right.